read in the month of March was Joe Abercrombie's Red Country. This book is a western. It's about a young woman called Shy South and Lamb. In the book, they cross through the near and far country in search of Shy's stolen little brother and sister Rowan Pitt. And they meet people along the way and shit happens. I really like this book because most books that I've read, the characters tend to be inept. And it can get boring reading 6 pages of the character whining about how they don't know what to do and they're getting their butt kicked for the next 10 pages after that, and then somehow within like half a paragraph they develop these cool ass powers and win and they don't even know how. No, that doesn't happen in this book. In this book, all the characters are badass. I like that about this book. You don't read that very often. The second book that I read in the month of March is Ellen Campbell's Sea of Ghosts. It's the first book in the Gravedigger Chronicles, and in this book we follow Colonel Thomas Granger, the head of the Gravediggers, as he is exiled by the Emperor. In exile, Colonel Thomas Granger becomes a jailer, and he gets these 2 prisoners. He takes these 2 prisoners in his charge that ultimately change his life forever. I really like this book because the writing style is really immersive and the world is really, really interesting. I don't really want to give much away, but it's like magic and science and kind of steampunky, and they all just... Magic and science. When magic and science do this, I'm all about that. I am here for magic and science coming together. I'm all about that. The third book that I read, admittedly for fun, in the month of March was The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. From what I know, this is the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. It's about fucking Narnia. It's a good book. Don't really need to say more on that. The fourth book that I read in the month of March was Insomnia by Stephen King. This is about a 70-plus-year-old man called Ralph Roberts developing early rise insomnia after his wife dies, and then he starts to hallucinate. He thinks he's hallucinating, but he's actually seeing things that are there. He's seeing like a heightened reality, I guess. He's not the only one in his town. Another friend of his comes to him saying that she's seeing this stuff as well. She's a retired old woman, I think around her 60s, in between 60 and 70, and together they save the world. Old people save the world. That's not something you get in most books nowadays. Nowadays it's all about the teenage protagonists. So reading from the point of view of old people saving the world is pretty awesome, and it's a new perspective. So if you want something new and you're sick of the teen protagonists of this day and age, Insomnia. Warning, Stephen King fucks you up. I'm not gonna lie to you there. You get fucked up when you read a Stephen King book because it's Stephen King and you have been warned. The last book that I read in the month of March was The Guardian of the Dead by Karen Healy. This is about a New Zealand girl called Ellie Spencer who discovers that not all myths are myths, and it centers around Māori mythology and it's set in New Zealand. Country pride. I have country pride. Of course I love this book. So Karen Healy isn't Māori, but her descriptions of the myths that she talked about were incredibly accurate, and that's always very nice, especially for a mythology or a culture that isn't usually portrayed, especially in YA or in anything. There are people out there who think New Zealand is about as real as Narnia. I live in New Zealand. We're real people, I promise. But it was nice, and I really liked it. It was just something different and country pride, and it was really easy to read because I come from New Zealand. A lot of the Māori words in here I can imagine would be really hard for people to pronounce, just like, you know, Greek mythology words are really hard for me to pronounce. So I'm going to help you out there because Karen, Ms. Karen, she done us a bad one, so I'm gonna teach you this, and I'm not gonna give you any context. Patupaere he taiaha. Okay, you got it. I got it. That's good. At the moment I'm reading this book called Matter of Resistance by Raymond Vogel. I'm gonna try and get a photo of it up here. Editing Ashley, there you go. I found it in Goodreads under a list called Teenagers in Space. I read the blurb, but I can't remember what it was about, so I'm just kind of reading it willy-nilly now. And I did buy it on my phone, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna like that. I hope it doesn't hinder my experience with the book. I hope I don't like come back and do a wrap-up and say, oh, I hated this book because I had to read it on my phone. I don't like reading on my phone, but I'm still reading it. The second book I plan to read is Spellwright by Blake Charlton. I've read it before, but I didn't get into it because the words are extremely small on the page. That's extremely small font for a 12-year-old to get into, but I remember it being pretty unique because it was written by someone who has severe dyslexia, and they basically gave the main character, the main protagonist, a form of dyslexia, but this fucks shit up because words happen to be magic in this world. You write out the words in the ear and you create a spell, but if you're dyslexic and you can't spell, shit happens. Look forward to rereading this now that I'm older, wiser, and a hell of a lot more appreciative of story rather than font size. The last book I plan to read this month is Prince Caspian, The Return to Narnia, a story for children by C.S. Lewis. I have no fucking clue what order, like the third, the fourth book in the Chronicles of Narnia. This has a thing in it that says it's the second book, but it's not the second book. It's the second movie, but it's not the second book because there are things that come before it. I think. It might be the second book, I don't know. I know the series well. If you've seen the movie, that beach that they first come into when they first land in Narnia in the movie, that is a beach in New Zealand. It's called Cathedral Cove. I have country pride. Were you here when I talked about, you know, Guardian of the Dead? Country pride. Ruling the day. Haere, bye bye. I just took the piss in that take. Cool.